All right, well, good morning, everyone. Mark Wilson here again, Florida Chamber in Tallahassee. I very much looking forward to conversation today. We have, again, a very special guest with us today, our own Dr. Jerry Parrish, our foundation's chief economist. We actually both have some brand new information to share with you today. The way we're going to work this, I'm going to go ahead and put up our agenda for you. The way we're going to work this today is I've got quite a number, I think about 10 or so questions that we've asked you over the last week relative to survey results. And as we do every week, we're going to start off by being a mirror and giving you a perspective on what all of our peers are experiencing and saying. I especially want to spend a few minutes on dues. This came up last week, so we're going to take a historical look at what you think's happening with dues. But you can see on the agenda here, we've got quite a bit to cover. Some of you are you're just amazing me at what you're doing locally with our local framework. I'm going to give a couple examples of that today. We're also going to show the county trends on the COVID tracker and just show you how that works. That's starting to get a lot of local media pickup in some of your markets, and I would expect a lot more of that in the coming days. And then also Tammy has been working with me on a Chamber Strong campaign. I'm going to show you a little bit about that and really get your feedback on that. And then Dr. Parrish has come up with, as he always does, some new information to share with you today. Today's a day full of webinars. We've got quite a bit going on our end, and so we're going to really jump right in here. And then the bulk of our time today, we've really built this so that we could have, per your suggestions, so that we could have pretty significant time dedicated to Q&A. And so we're going to dive right into this. Like I say, we've got a lot to cover. And again, I appreciate all the phone calls and texts. I know for all of us, it's still 7 days a week right now. But just to, before we get into the polling results that you've provided for us, just to level set sort of where we are. Remember, Palm Beach started phase 1 just yesterday, and each of these phases is supposed to be a minimum of 2 weeks. It's also been announced that next Monday, the 18th, Broward and Dade should move into phase 1 as well. That's next Monday, the 18th. For the rest of the state, as long as the health metrics continue to move in the right direction, for the rest of Florida, we should all be moving into phase 2 on Monday, the 18th. One of the things that our team is tracking is, there's been quite a number of executive orders from the governor, and most of them have expiration dates. And so, for example, I was talking to the governor's general counsel just this morning, and on Sunday night, the 17th at midnight, there was an executive order relative to eviction notices for residents. And that executive order expires on Sunday night. And so we don't know if it's going to get extended or if it's just going to be allowed to expire. But for those of you who are keeping track of that, just know that that one is one that's also that's set to expire at the end of this week. So we'll be keeping tabs on that. So I'm going to go ahead and dive straight into the results and what you shared with us. Again, we've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to go fast. As always, most of this deck will be sent to you later today, so no need to write all this down unless you're going to use it today. And then also a recording of this will be sent out later today as well. So are your members taking advantage of the phased-in approach? Just about everybody is. I think for the 4% that are not, what we're hearing is that there are some restaurants that have decided to wait until phase 2, which I believe will be 50% occupancy. So we're hearing a little bit about that. And then I know some of you are unsure. Some of the not applicable, there's a lot of home-based business, or there's a lot of people that are continuing that really never closed down at all. They're continuing to work remotely. So, but anyway, the good news is it looks like most members are beginning to reopen and move into more regular operations. Are your customers returning to your member businesses? And this is really great news. To have almost 70% of customers coming back is really what it's going to take to get this economy going again. We obviously just need to make sure that it's done safely. Many of you participated last week in the call we had with our Surgeon General, and he was pretty clear that all of the CDC guidelines still need to be met. The social distancing and masks and hand sanitizer, taking temperatures when your employees come into the building. Some people are taking temperatures of customers and so forth. But anyway, that's a mirror for you of what others are saying. Do you have an ample supply of PPEs? This is a big problem area because the number one answer is people are unsure. So the Florida Chamber Safety Council is sort of sprung into action here, and Diego Sanchez is our senior safety trainer, and you'll be hearing more about him in the months to come. But what we're doing for our members is if our members are having a hard time figuring out what are the guidelines, some people have masks and PPEs, but they don't really know how many are they supposed to have. And can we make our own? Do we have to buy them somewhere? If you have questions about the guidelines, go ahead and send an email to Diego, and he'll be happy to research the situation and at least help you track down whether it's CDC, OSHA, or EPA guidelines. We have a full-time team here for our membership, and they're happy to help you with that. Do you believe your local healthcare facilities are adequately staffed? This is great news, and keep in mind that this is part and parcel. This is hugely important to Florida moving into phase 2 and then eventually phase 3. And our hospitals are just doing amazing work locally, so I know they have your full support. Is your chamber interested in hosting virtual candidate interviews? These are the candidate schools. I'm going to talk more about this in the next section, but just since last week, since I brought this up, we've actually had 7 new chambers sign up for the candidate schools, and so thanks for that. Our own Florida Chamber Political Institute candidate interviews, which are for legislative seats, the first 2 days are tomorrow and Thursday, and of course we've switched to a virtual candidate interview process for that as well. If you have any chamber members that are pro-business that want to run for office for the legislature, keep in mind June 12 is when the filing deadline is this year for people who want to run for legislative office. Here's a slide I wanted to spend a minute on. I mentioned this earlier, and this has to do with dues. This came up on last week's call. This was one of the most requested items that you wanted to talk about. Again, I'm going to send this out to everybody later, but what I'd be looking at here is on the left side, we ask this exact same question. And what I would say is, the good news is, I don't know that there's good news in here, except to say that if you look at that sort of 11 to 20% and then the 21 to 33, I think a month ago, many of you were pretty optimistic in your view that this COVID deal was going to be short-lived and that it was not going to have an impact, a significant impact on chambers. I think, back then, almost half of you didn't know how this was going to impact your chamber from a dues perspective. Now we only have 22% of you that say that you don't know. So unfortunately, the numbers have moved into a more negative category. I'll remind you, in my role as the national chair of the National Association of State Chambers, as well as a committee of 100 member of the U.S. Chamber, what we're seeing on a pretty regular basis is a lot of chambers are downgrading their renewal dollars by 25%, and their new revenue, not just membership, but new revenue, sponsorships, registration, memberships for the year at 50% discounted off of what you've budgeted. So that's beginning to be a pretty common way of looking at this. So just giving you feedback on that. This is obviously a pretty important slide for all of us. Which of the following represents what you've had to do? The number that jumped out at me here is that, 40% of you have said you've made no changes whatsoever on the staffing. 60% of you have. You can look at this later, but nonetheless, it is what it is. When it comes to the unemployment compensation, what are you hearing from your members? And again, this is pretty interesting. 37% say that employees are returning to work, but 1 in 5 say they're not because they're making more on unemployment. On my national calls every week, this is a pretty hot topic. What can Congress do to fix the problem that they created? Not sure of the answer, but nevertheless, it's out there. And we're going to talk about we're going to talk about hashtag Chamber Strong here in just a couple of minutes, and I'm going to ask everybody to really put a lot of thought into it between this week and next week. But I'll speak more to that when we get to it. This is a slide I've shared before, but I want to keep sharing it because everybody wants to know when's the economy going to get back to where we were before. And I just want to reiterate that mayors and county commissioners and the governor and the president, we can say that the economy is open again from a legal standpoint, from a governance standpoint, but what we can't do is make customers go back to restaurants, go back to retailers, and go back to spending money again. And it's just something we've all got to be aware of, right, is how safe can they feel, how healthy can they feel. And I think chambers can play a bigger role in helping businesses understand this sort of psychological problem that we have. The sooner people feel safe to go back, the faster the economy recovers, as long as we continue to practice the CDC guidelines. I mentioned candidate schools, and again, 7 of you have signed up for this just since last week. Another 7 of you, I should say. I think we're approaching 20 of you now. And what I really wanted to do is just put this slide up here that for those of you who are interested in doing virtual candidate schools, keep in mind, you see that number on the screen, 4,502. What this means is from this year through 2025, there's over 4,500 elections, whether that's mayor or tax collector, school board. There's 4,500 elections between now and 2025, so we're trying to not only find better candidates, we are not endorsing at the local level. I'll say that every time we talk about this. That's up to you as to whether you endorse or not. But many of you in our strategic planning process at the Florida Chamber ask us to help put together a candidate school that could be used all over Florida, but could be customized for a local chamber and personalized for the issues that local chambers in your particular area care about. And that's really what we're doing here. So thanks to all of you who are participating, and you can see on screen there how to get engaged in this if you want more information. All right. So I think for the last 6 weeks, 7 weeks, we've been talking about a framework for local leadership, and I'm not going to go through that framework today, but what I do want to reiterate is what's coming through loud and clear in all of our surveys of our members, and also the feedback we're getting across the country, is there is a huge concern over liability. And think about the situation here, not only for the healthcare industry, but for all of our collective memberships. We have employees and customers who are going to be coming back in to work or coming back in to shop or get services. And if one of those employees or one of those customers happens to get sick with COVID, there's going to be plenty of personal injury trial lawyers out there who say, oh, clearly you must have picked this up at your place of employment or wherever you were shopping today. And you can just see the flood, the tsunami of lawsuits that are coming down the road on this. So Congress is working on this. The governor is very concerned about this. Many in the legislature are concerned about this. And so we're going to continue to try to provide solutions for this as we try to get our economy going again. And again, the whole idea here is all the action is at the local level, right? So the White House has spoken. The governor continues to be aligned to the White House. And many of you are now trying to make sure that you're aligned locally. That's the recipe for success. On the lawsuit abuse piece, Many of you are in communities, we have 12 public universities in Florida with, about 450,000 students. And, one of the early warning signs we see here is there's beginning to be lawsuits filed against most of the major universities in the United States, not just in Florida. And I just wanted to put up here, we're starting to see this in Florida as well. So just want to bring that to everybody's attention. It's the beginning of a lawsuit frenzy. It's not the end. And then finally, on the restart piece, I want to remind everybody, I know we're all focused on getting our members back up and running again, but I just want to implore the importance of your chamber also having a group of members. Keep in mind, not everybody's been negatively impacted by COVID, and there's a subset of your membership that wants to start talking about what's the future economic opportunity in your community because of everything we've learned about with COVID. And keep in mind, about 24% of our members have said that they could actually work remotely indefinitely. And so, things are not ever going to go completely back to the way they were before, but can your community be a mecca for research and development? Can it be a mecca for the future of what manufacturing and reshoring jobs might look like? Can supply chains go through your community? These are things that a lot of you are thinking about. I want to give an example here. I clearly can't list all of the examples. So many of you are calling, emailing, texting us with what you're doing locally, and we're doing the best we can to share that with other chambers who are looking for the same information. But I did want to show you, what Todd and the team are doing over in Escambia and Santa Rosa. We don't have time today for me to show you the whole, I think, 30-page manual that they've put together. But the chambers in Northwest Florida have worked together on a plan called Reopening Escarosa. And Todd and I talked about this. We went through this the other day. And much of what they're working on in Northwest Florida follows the lines of the 6 committees that we talked about. They're even creating a Reimagining Escarosa committee to look at what's the future of the region going to be. So if you haven't seen this particular plan, I think Broward, with Dan's leadership, came up with a plan about 3 weeks ago with the mayor and the county there that was really good early on. This particular plan it's about 30 pages. It goes through each of the industry sectors, and it really is a really good way of providing guidance in terms of how to open up a region. So if you haven't taken a look at it, in fact, when we send our post-webinar message out to you today, we'll put a link to the Reopening Escarosa work product that those chambers are working on in Northwest Florida. It's pretty good work, and I think that I think a lot of us can steal. And as another way of what they say in the chamber business with R&D, it stands for rip off and duplicate. So the more we can use each other's work, the better off our whole industry is going to be. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this with us. I'm almost ready to turn the program over to our chief economist so he can go through his numbers and his analysis with you. But one of the things I wanted to point out, I was having an exchange with Eric in Gainesville early this morning, and so many of you are just doing such an amazing job of providing your community with key information that they need. And I just wanted to show you, I think it was a week ago today, actually, that you all, I think we had 235 chambers on our webinar last week, and you all were the first ones in Florida to get to see this brand new tool, which is now being used in most communities around Florida one way or another. And so this is the statewide COVID tracker that you're looking at right here. What I want to do, I only have 2 more slides in this section. I want to show you what Alachua County's county COVID tracker looks like this morning. And it'll look different tomorrow, and it'll look different the next day. And many of you, I know the Daytona Chamber has this on your homepage. I know many chambers are beginning to use this, but here is this morning's Alachua County COVID county level tracker. And you get here by you just go to the floridascorecard.org, and then you click on the county tab on the top right, and all 67 counties are there. And then you just simply click on your own county. But I just pulled this in about 15 minutes ago. So this is today's, and what you can see here is Alachua County had their first case 63 days ago. To the left of that, you see 3.9%, and it's green. That's good. I'd want to point out to you, this is a cumulative number. So this is their percent of positive testing is 3.9% right now. That's cumulative all the way back to, since their first COVID case showed up. This week, this particular box is going to be pivoting to match the White House gating criteria. So this will actually be a 2-week, a 14-day average of testing, and that'll happen in the next couple of days. But on the left side, you can see Alachua has had a total of 320 confirmed cases. That'll always be red, right, because it can only increase. But the number below that, if I were Eric at the Gainesville Chamber, the number below that's concerning because the White House has said you need your 14-day average of new cases to be going down, not up, in order to move to the next phase. And if you were to look at this live for your own county, and you can see where my cursor is right here. If you were to double-click on that tile, this is actually what would come up. And so what you can see in Eric's case is the trend is down, which is good. And then they've had a 1-day blip back up again, which moves the average to red. So hopefully, when we look at the numbers later today and you see tomorrow, hopefully this trend line will come back down again. But if it moves back up again, then obviously that's an uh-oh meter for everybody in Alachua County to take a look at. And again, there's nothing else like this anywhere in Florida, and we built this so local chambers would be able to be on the front lines to wake up every day and be the first one to call the local radio station or the first one to be working with your board of directors and your hospital members on making sure that your community is doing everything that it can, to use these early warning signs. So with that said, again, if you look over here on the left, you see we're starting to see local media pick up this county level tracker. We've had several calls late yesterday and today, people wanting to do interviews with us about the local county tracker. I would imagine if your media teams on your end have an interest in positioning you locally, I'd say go for it. I mean, this tool's there for you. Thanks to our friends at the Columbia County Chamber. This is, literally right on the homepage of your site. We just grabbed this photo yesterday, so really appreciate it. Thanks for doing that. And then right before I turn it over to Jerry, I'm going to just put this out here for you right now, and then I'd really like to talk about it when we get to the Q&A portion of our meeting today. Tammy Bracewell, to her credit, well over a month ago, started providing leadership to me and talking about, chambers of commerce are the most important organization in a community, and I wonder if there's something we could all do to remind everybody the importance of chambers. And we talked about it, and we agreed it was the right thing to do, but possibly a little bit too early. And so last week, Tammy and myself and Nancy Kiefer jumped on a phone call. We had been using, at the Florida Chamber, #ChamberStrong back, I think, in March, and had quite a bit of social media activity on it, and then candidly stopped using it. Some other chambers around the country are using ChamberStrong. I'm not trying to say this is something the Florida Chamber owns. I think it's a pretty generic term that really works. And so many of you have seen in the last week, we've started talking about, show me a strong community, I'll show you a strong chamber. And we've talked a lot about, how can we collectively take a brand like this, #ChamberStrong, and how can, we have 200 chambers using it locally. How can the Florida Chamber use it statewide? And then how can the entire community of chambers and the brand of chambers leverage this brand right now so that companies and communities can see that chambers of commerce are not only worth investing in, but as we move from the restart phase, which is where we are now, in the next couple of months to the recovery phase, there's literally no better group than a local chamber of commerce that people should be investing in because it's what you're built for. And so when we get to the Q&A portion, I'm hoping we can have some dialogue about, how willing are all of us to adopt this brand and this movement over the coming months so that all of us think about the collective power of 200 chambers with social media in Florida and think about the concept here. Katie Worthington is on the board. She's at the Winter Haven Chamber. I know she's participating today, so thank you, Katie. And she's also on the board of directors of the Florida Chamber. Katie, you've come up with some great ideas that the Florida Chamber is going to run with here, and I hope we have time to talk about this today. But Tammy Bracewell and Nancy Kiefer, thank you both for the hours that you've put into this. I'm looking forward to feedback on it in a little while. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the controls over to our chief economist, Dr. Jerry Parrish. He's got some pretty special things to share with you today. And then as soon as Jerry's done, we're going to immediately pivot into the Q&A portion. So I see there's questions starting to come in, but please use the Q&A feature and go ahead and if there's something that you want to share with everyone, just go ahead and put it in the Q&A and I'll share it with everybody. If it's an actual question, put it in there too, and then I'll moderate the Q&A as soon as we can get to it. So Dr. Parrish, I'm going to stop sharing here and I'm going to ask you to, go ahead and take over, and then we'll go into Q&A when you're done.
All right. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it being here today. I'm glad everybody is on the call. Let me pull up a few slides. I've actually seen a couple of questions I'll try to address while I'm talking. Here we go. This is the daily map. If you're getting the Chamber's daily email, you'll see this on there. It talks about the new cases, the increase. I want you to take a look at that increase in test number, 22,111. That's a record since we've been testing here in Florida for one day. You got to kind of remember sometimes the private labs send a whole bunch of them in at one time. That could affect this number. But look right below that, the overall percent positive, and that's the cumulative number for Florida, has dropped down to 7.3%. That's important, and these numbers are interesting, but this is a cumulative number. We really have to focus on taking a look at two things. One is the average daily cases, and you've got that on the scorecard now. And the other one is the percent of cases that are positive. What's interesting about looking in Florida is let's take a look at the number of counties who have less than 10 cases a day. And it's 54 out of 67 counties. And I've shown this partial map of Florida. It looks like something's been eaten on it. But these are the counties that literally, it's a heat map, so you can see the ones that are darker heading toward 10 cases. The highest one here is 9.0. So, but you see quite a few counties that have less than one case a day and several that have 0 new cases a day. This is over the past 14 days is averaged. Florida's number is 631.7 right now. And you can see that on the front page of the scorecard, and you can see your counties as well. I want to show you what all the counties look like now. These are adding the rest of the counties in. You can see that 54 cases below 10. 1 to 2, there's only 12, less than 1, 22 counties. And so there's only 13 counties that have 12 or more cases. And you can see this is a heat map. You can see a bulk of them, about 60% in most every day of the new cases are coming from Southeast Florida. So, that you can see every day. You can see it on the Florida scorecard. You can send the link directly to your county page or to the home page of the Florida scorecard. You can copy and paste the tiles. I use the snipping tool because it gives a really nice high-resolution tile. You could also screenshot it as well, and there's multiple ways you can get this info out. But you can send it to the local newspaper, to your county commissioner. I encourage you to do that and send them a link back to where they can see that on the Florida scorecard, because there's other great data, as you know, that we can use. Now, one of the things that has come up, I'm going to pull up Palm Beach County. You notice they've just been able to move into phase one. When we started putting these new tiles on the scorecard a few weeks ago, we made the decision to put things, the number of cases, the average daily cases, those kind of things. I want to point out a couple things. First is the weekly initial unemployment claims. That number for Palm Beach is only 12,000 right now. Department of Economic Opportunity has only got them posted through April the 3rd. So that's the same for every county. That number is going to go way up, I will tell you, when they get caught up to current. So keep that in mind. But also this percent of cases that are positive. When we started this, there was no weekly data available. So this is literally the cumulative amount. From day one, you give 100, you give 1,000 cases and, 103 are positive, then that's where you get this 10.3%. Now, starting, Mark's already mentioned this, starting likely this week, maybe as soon as this afternoon and probably tomorrow, we're going to start putting up the weekly percent positive. So all the counties are taking the number of number of tests they've given. They're doing it by that week. And it's interesting because certainly you would expect that 3 or 4 weeks ago, most counties had a pretty high positive rate, but in most cases they've come down. So I wanted to show you what it looks like for your county and everybody else's. Right now, if you just take the most recent week we have data for, which is the week of May the 3rd, only about 3.5% of the cases or of the test indicated positive. And you can see there's a whole lot of cases down here that are in the 1 and 2% range. So when you look up, when you wake up probably tomorrow and look at the Florida scorecard, this is what you're going to see for your county. You're going to see the historical number back to March the 22nd. And so you'll be able to click on that tile. You'll be able to see the path. Like I said, in most cases, the number's going down. A couple of instances we've seen where they've gone through a nursing home and given a bunch of tests. They've gone through maybe a prison, like in Liberty County, and gave a bunch of tests where the daily average went up from near zero to, 7 or 18 or bigger numbers than that. But anyway, that's the big change. Wasn't something that was available when we first put that tile in the scorecard, but starting as early as later today, you'll see that. And anytime if you have any questions about these things, please pick up the phone and give me a call. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is our unemployment rate. You all saw the national news of what's happened to the U.S. This coming Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning, we'll get the Florida number. We'll be able to do it by county and by state as well, but that data is not available for Florida yet. So when you see your unemployment rate on the Florida scorecard, you're literally looking at the March number. On May the 15th, which is Friday, we'll get the April number. And remember, that will show the indication of what has been going on about the middle of last month, because jobs are counted during the week that the 12th of the month falls in. Here's the path of the unemployment initial claims. You can see it dropped substantially. Looks like they've broken through it and taken care of a lot of the logjam that was going on there. 1.847 million claims. This is there's a live scorecard on Department of Economic Opportunity's website, the site that shows these numbers. These are from yesterday. Nearly 1.85 million claims, nearly 1.35 million unique claims. That means there's been 500,000 that they've had to sort through that were either duplicated or fraudulent or something happened. But you can see there the U.S. unemployment rate at 14.7%. Florida's number is going to be big. I don't know if it's going to be higher or lower than the U.S., but certainly in the teens is my expectation of what we'll see on Friday. As soon as those get out, we'll post them on the Florida scorecard and let you see them there as well. But anyway, I know there's questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Mark and let him take it from here. Thanks, Mark.
All right, Jerry, thank you. As I'm taking this back over, I actually would like to ask you about the unemployment. I had a question come in. So right now in Florida, so nationally, there's over 30 million people who are unemployed. In Florida, that number is over 1 million. And can you give, so right before COVID, we had something like 6,000, if memory serves me right?
Initial claims?
Initial claims?
Yeah, 5,000 to 6,000 was a normal week during that time.
Okay. And then, so we've had 5,000 to 6,000 in a week. And so it's hard to compare a week to a cumulative number, but we've had over 1 million people in the last, say, 6 weeks in Florida file for unemployment.
Right.
So that's a pretty steep curve. I'm getting questions about how to read all those numbers. So.
Okay. Yeah, their unemployment claims are always weekly.
Right.
And so when you saw those numbers that I posted up, and you'll see them when we send the slides out, there were 400,000 and 500,000. And the interesting part about this for me is our probability of recession tracker that's always on the scorecard on our business climate and competitiveness pillar. When you get a 2 standard deviation move in unemployment claims and the expectation, that thing goes crazy and, it'll bounce way up. Well, we went from expecting about 6,000 initial unemployment claims. A 2 standard deviation move up would have put it at around 7,800 or 7,600 claims. That first week we got 74,000. So we got 70 plus standard deviations and then 200 standard deviations. I've never seen an economic series move like this ever, and certainly it overwhelms the model and pegs the probability of recession at 100%. So we immediately moved it to 100% and reflecting, what we're in. We're in a recession now, so it's absolutely correct.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm going to go to questions in a second. We have a number of them that are starting to come in addition to the ones I had earlier. Let me first share with everybody I would be shocked if everybody doesn't know about the coronavirus website that the Florida Chamber has. We've continued to add to it every day in terms of resources. I'm going to ask a special favor this week. If there's something that you've added locally that you think that we need to add to the Florida Chamber's coronavirus section, I'd consider it a big favor if you'd share that with me. Just email it to me later, share that with me, and our team will take a look at it. It's also a good way for me to stay updated on some of the really cool things that you're adding locally. And then before we go to Q&A, I wanted to highlight we have a relatively new safety council at the Florida Chamber. We're the Florida chapter of the National Safety Council. And so on the right side there, you see all of the seminars that we have coming up. But I wanted to draw special attention to what I've highlighted in yellow here. We have a special webinar coming up tomorrow. We have the EPA, OSHA, and CDC all coming on a complimentary webinar for Chamber members. And this is specifically aimed at answering your members and our members' questions about guidelines relative to keeping the office safe, so to speak, or your workplace safe in a COVID return. So it doesn't get better than having all 3 of these groups on a webinar. Most of this webinar will be just like the one we did with the General Counsel for the Governor and also the Surgeon General last week, where it's mostly Q&A after they make some opening comments. On the webinar message that we send out today, we'll also provide you a link to this in case you want your staff or your members to have access to this. Again, Florida Chamber is hosting it, but it's really meant for Chamber members of local chambers and Florida Chamber statewide. It's complimentary. We have plenty of room, so if anybody's interested in sharing it, be on the lookout for that later today. Okay, So I'm going to go to Q&A, and let me just take these questions in the order that they came. The first one, I think Jerry already answered it. It is from Tom, and it said the number of new cases is really an incomplete statistic. It's just a function of the number of tests returned that same day. I think we would completely agree with that, Tom. We put the cumulative number of positive cases out there, number one, so you can compare your county to another. But really, globally, there's over 4 million positive cases now, and Florida has about 1% of the world's positive cases. But if you look at Florida compared to other states, even though we have 1/5 of our population are seniors, Florida's just doing an amazing job compared to other states. Look at Michigan, look at Illinois, look at, places like New York. In California, they're just off the charts. And Florida's done a really good job with the policies that we've had of really containing and maintaining these numbers. All right. Let's see, Jerry, this one may come your direction. It says, getting a lot of calls from individuals that cannot get off of unemployment. Their phone calls are not being answered. 57 calls on Friday and Saturday with no answers. And so Jerry, I didn't mean to send this one to you, other than Jerry and I are both in contact with our membership, but also with DEO. I'm on 2 calls a week with DEO, and I know that they've made major league investments and brought in extra people. I can see who this is from. I will follow up with you offline and, find out why 57 phone calls in 2 days are going unanswered. We've not had that experience, but we do know that they continue to be overwhelmed. So, Jerry, do you have anything else to add to that?
No.
Yeah. Again, this is another one that's similar. It says our businesses are having a challenging time getting people back to work, specifically due to the $600 a week. Will the employees still get $600 if they're brought back part-time? Jerry, do you know the answer to that?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't think that they will. We actually, this has been a regular conversation around here. I don't think that they'll get the full 600 if you bring them back part-time, but we will get the answer to that, and if we can, we'll actually include that in the update that goes out. I have a couple people on staff that are already working on those answers because we're all in that same boat. Next one is people getting reemployed are worried that they will be breaking the law as they're trying to get off of unemployment. Again, I think that's related to the first question, where, again, Congress, on my 3 weekly calls, national calls, 2 with the U.S. Chamber and 1 with the National Association of State Chambers, I can just tell you this is a top-level conversation that when Congress created an incentive to not work, they created a disincentive to go back to work, and it's a big problem, epic proportions. So I'm not surprised we're getting these questions. I wish I had good answers about what to do about it. So there's a question here from Chris, and it talks about phase 2 at the state and city. When do we believe we'll expand and complete phase 1, et cetera? So I can take this, and Jerry, if you want to add to it. Chris, I have every reason to believe that Monday, May 18th, is when the rest of Florida, not Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade, but I believe the rest of Florida moves into phase 2 on Monday, the 18th. Now, you're asking about occupancy and then gyms and arenas. Let me take those one at a time. I expect, please don't make decisions based on my expectations, but based on all the people that I've been talking to and being a student of this and really triaging all the people I'm talking to in the governor's office and health department and everywhere else, I believe that on the occupancy piece, I believe that we will be going from 25% to 50% for restaurants and retailers And I also believe that we'll be clarifying that in the next round of occupancy, that 50% will only apply to the customers. And we'll see how that gets worded, but I think it's going to be a double win for local businesses on that. In terms of gyms, fitness, and so forth, I expect that they will begin to be included in this next phase, obviously with quite a few restrictions. In terms of arenas and big gatherings, I'm not as optimistic. I still think it's going to be a little longer before the state, suggests that a lot of people gather together. And again, Chris, in other countries, this has been the very last thing to be brought back in line. So I would expect Florida will learn from a lot of that as well. Why are some people still not receiving any financial support from unemployment? I wish I had an answer to this. All I know is every time I talk with them, they tell me they're making progress and that they're finally able to deal with more people getting benefits than dealing with more people calling in that they can't get to. Again, I wish I had better answers for everybody, but I'm taking them as they come. C6s, this is actually a question that came in earlier. C5s and C6s, and the question really has to do with federal relief and maybe PPP grants and loans. I have every expectation that if Congress does a fourth round of stimulus and relief, I have every expectation that C5s and C6s will in fact be added to it. On my 3 national calls we do every week, there's an increasing sort of concern, though, over when will this fourth tranche of stimulus actually happen. I think everybody knows that the Senate president has said it's not going to happen unless there's full-blown liability and safe harbor protections. I believe C5s and C6s are going to be included. It's really just a matter of when does Congress come back. I don't think it's going to be until June at this point. But nevertheless, I'm really proud of chambers all across the country. You've all stepped up. I think we now have bipartisan support for chambers of commerce being included. Question here, will phase 2 include the reopening of all vacation rentals? So we don't know the answer to that. I do believe that it will begin, Gail, I do believe it will begin to include the opening of some. I know they're taking a close look at, how quickly can we open all vacation rentals. But again, remember the conventional wisdom here is, we have people traveling to Florida from other hot spots, from New York and other places. And, how do you set up safeguards in place? So I would imagine the larger vacation rental systems, maybe first. But again, don't quote me on that. I'm just trying to provide, perspective on the triage that I see. We expect to know by the end of the week. We hope to be able to announce all this on our Friday webinar we have with the Florida Chambers membership, which you're all included to participate in. Have a couple more here. Jerry, I know you've got another webinar to get on here. You got a hard stop. Is there anything you would want to add before you have to exit?
No, but I do hope that everybody will tune in on Thursday or on Friday on that call, because the job numbers are going to be, interesting and they're going to be large and be an indication of what's been going on in the state. And then we'll start to look at how many people have gone back to work since that number was calculated. I hope to be able to provide a little analysis of that. Okay.
Thank you, Jerry. We're getting a lot of questions in here on short-term rentals and whether it's, VRBO or different types of short-term rentals. So I think the best I can tell you right now is I'm in daily contact with Governor's office about this. The Florida Chamber has quite a number of members that are in that business, and so we're doing what we can to, balance, what the Department of Health and the governor's office is focused on with health metrics, with how quickly can we get the economy back up and going again. Frank Walker and his entire team are very focused on this, and so the second we have breaking news on this, we'll be sure to share it with everybody. Let me see. I think that may be last question that's come in. Nope, hang on. Actually, I think we got another one here. So there's another question in here about finishing up phase one. Chris, I may just call you offline in this because I think what gets confusing about phase one is the White House put out gating criteria for phase one back a month and a half ago or so, and that's when we immediately shared it with all of you. The phase one and phase two gating criteria were recommendations from the White House, and Governor DeSantis has chosen to not implement all of the phase one opportunities that Florida could have phased in. So, think about what happens with gyms and hair salons and movie theaters and things like that. The governor went ahead and is opening up hair salons this week, even though he could have done it last week according to the White House criteria. He just decided to wait a week on doing that. And so I think, Chris, the governor believes that, we can begin to move into phase two. And for some of the phase one criteria, as long as the criteria on health is met, he certainly has it under his purview to take a few things like hair salons if he wanted to, or movie theaters, or vacation rental by owner is a great example, and open them in phase two instead of in phase one. So if we've communicated that everything that the White House said in phase one had to be done in phase one, then I apologize for that, because some of these things the governor will decide to do in Florida's version of phase two. What we don't want to see is what Georgia did, which is where you take things that weren't supposed to happen until phase two or three and you accelerated them into phase one. But what Governor DeSantis clearly has the authority to do is take things that were allowed in phase one and reorder them based on a Florida-specific situation, like our 1 in 5 Floridians, is over 65, and so much of our economy is based on the 130 million people a year who visit here. He's made the decision to go a little slower on those two areas. Slower meaning, maybe by 1 to 3 weeks than some other people may have liked to have seen. But nevertheless, it's all in the works, and I think it's going to come online here pretty quickly. So appreciate everybody's patience on that. Let me see if there's anything else. Question here, will hair and beauty be added in phase two? They actually were just added this week in phase one in most all of Florida. There are certain restrictions. For example, for hair salons and barbers, you're supposed to do it by appointment only, and you have to maintain social distancing between workstations and so forth. If anybody needs a copy of that executive order that went out, by all means, you should know that it's on the Florida Chamber's COVID website as we speak, as is the live frequently asked questions portion. So any questions that came in today that I don't know the answer to automatically get kicked over to our FAQ section. Let me see, I had a couple other come in via text, so let me just check and see if I've covered any of them. Special session, we're getting a lot of questions, is there going to be a special session? I don't believe there will be. The incoming Senate president this past weekend said that he didn't think it was necessary. And just as a reminder for everyone, the budget year for the state of Florida, the budget year ends at the end of June. So for all intents and purposes, we have about 45 days left in the state of Florida's budget year. May 20th is an important day because either on the 19th or the 20th, we're actually going to get a pretty complete look at just how bad the sales tax collections, the tax collections from the month of April were. That's when we're going to, we only have partials from the month of March, and I think they were down 17% over expectations. And so I would imagine April's going to be the worst month that we'll see, and we're going to get a good picture of that on the 19th or 20th. Also, Florida received almost $6 billion from Congress, sort of as a COVID stabilization opportunity, and Florida has about $4 billion in our own stabilization funds. So in talking with the Department of Revenue as well as our state's chief financial officer every week, there's about $10 billion collectively in there that could help us get through depending on how significant the drop is. So as much as I'd like to see a special session on litigation reform and protections for your members as they come back online, realistically, we're probably not going to see a special session, at least not in this fiscal year, I don't think. Let's see. Let me just see if any others came in online. Okay. I think that's everything we had. Let me finish up on going back on a point I made a while ago about this brand of Chamber Strong, hashtag Chamber Strong. We're not asking anybody to use it this week. We do have a small team, and many of you have actually been texting me. Just got another one texting me while we're on this call now, saying your chamber's interested in talking about it. So we have an FACP board meeting this afternoon where we'll talk a little bit more about this. But the concept would be potentially starting next week that chambers all over Florida, as a way to bring attention to the important roles of local chambers of commerce all over Florida. The concept would be, could all of you begin to use this in your own messaging? And if the Florida Chamber used it every day, if I used it, if we were driving, quite a big social media movement, if you will, in Florida, all with the idea of driving attention to the importance of local chambers being anchors for the restart and recovery process in your community. From my perspective, only good things can come from reminding people that, strong communities, really need strong chambers. And so special thanks again to Katie Wortherington, Nancy Kiefer, and Tammy. We'll be communicating more on this throughout the week. My expectation would be, we'll communicate again on this toward the end of the week, and then on next Tuesday's call, my expectation is we would roll out a set of tools that are available for every local chamber in Florida, sort of in an open sourced environment for every local chambers, that would be interested in it. Let me just see here, make sure I didn't get any more questions coming in. Okay. I think that's everything. So, listen, we appreciate it, everybody. We've been making notes here on the call. We will, here in the next little bit, we'll get the post-webinar message back out to everybody with, we'll do our best to answer the question that you asked us. And we'll send the deck out as well as a recording of the webinar. But everybody be safe. Thanks so much for leading your communities and for all your words of encouragement. We'll look forward to catching up soon. Take care.